Question 1. During the evaluation of a new cloud automation platform for managing sensitive customer data, which approach best aligns with the regulatory framework for cloud management and automation, ensuring both operational efficiency and compliance? Option A. Implement the automation solution that promises the fastest deployment times, with the understanding that compliance checks can be retroactively applied after the system is operational. Option B. Select the automation platform with the lowest upfront cost and the most intuitive user interface, assuming that standard security features will be sufficient for regulatory compliance. Option C. Prioritize automation solutions that offer extensive integration capabilities with existing security and compliance monitoring tools, and conduct a thorough review of the vendor's compliance certifications and data handling policies against relevant regulations. Option D. Rely solely on the cloud provider's general compliance statements for the underlying infrastructure, without independently verifying the automation platform's specific adherence to data privacy and security regulations. The correct answer is C. Prioritize automation solutions that offer extensive integration capabilities with existing security and compliance monitoring tools, and conduct a thorough review of the vendor's compliance certifications and data handling policies against relevant regulations. Explanation. This scenario presents a common challenge in cloud management and automation, balancing the need for rapid deployment and operational efficiency with the imperative to maintain robust security and compliance. The professional is tasked with selecting an automation strategy that not only meets functional requirements, but also adheres to the stringent regulatory framework governing cloud operations within the specified jurisdiction. The challenge lies in identifying an approach that is technically sound, cost-effective, and most importantly, compliant with all applicable laws and guidelines. The correct approach represents best professional practice because it prioritizes a comprehensive understanding of the regulatory landscape before implementing any automation. This proactive stance ensures that the chosen automation strategy is inherently designed to meet compliance obligations, thereby minimizing the risk of future remediation efforts, fines, or reputational damage. Adherence to regulatory frameworks, such as those governing data privacy, security standards, and operational resilience, is not merely a suggestion but a mandatory requirement. By integrating compliance checks and controls directly into the automation workflows, the professional demonstrates a commitment to responsible and ethical cloud governance. An incorrect approach that overlooks or inadequately addresses regulatory requirements is professionally unacceptable. For instance, selecting an automation tool solely based on its perceived efficiency or cost without a thorough review of its compliance certifications or its ability to integrate with existing compliance monitoring systems represents a significant ethical and regulatory failure. This could lead to the deployment of systems that inadvertently violate data residency laws, fail to meet audit trail requirements, or expose sensitive data to unauthorized access, all of which carry severe legal and financial repercussions. Another failure would be to assume that a vendor's general compliance claims are sufficient without performing due diligence to verify their applicability to the specific services being utilized and the data being processed. This lack of due diligence is a direct contravention of the professional duty to ensure that all deployed technologies operate within legal and ethical boundaries. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a multi-stage approach. First, clearly define the scope of the automation and the types of data it will handle. Second, conduct a thorough review of all relevant regulatory frameworks applicable to the organization's operations and the data involved. Third, evaluate potential automation solutions not only for their technical capabilities and cost but critically for their compliance features, certifications, and the vendor's commitment to regulatory adherence. Fourth, engage with legal and compliance teams to validate the chosen approach. Finally, implement the automation with built-in monitoring and auditing capabilities to ensure ongoing compliance. Question 2. Process analysis reveals that a cloud operations team is tasked with automating the provisioning of virtual machines and associated services using VMware vRealize automation, now Area Automation. The primary objective is to accelerate deployment times to meet aggressive business demands. However, the organization operates under strict data privacy regulations that mandate specific security configurations for all deployed infrastructure. The team is debating the best method to ensure that automated deployments adhere to these security mandates without significantly hindering the speed of provisioning. Which of the following approaches best balances the need for rapid deployment with the imperative of regulatory compliance and security? Option A. Temporarily disable or bypass certain security checks within vRealize automation to achieve faster deployment times, with the intention of addressing them later. Option B. Implement manual security audits and configuration checks for every virtual machine and service deployed through automation after the provisioning process is complete. Option C. Integrate security policies and configurations directly into vRealize automation blueprints and leverage its policy engine to enforce compliance during the provisioning lifecycle. Option D. Focus solely on the speed of provisioning, assuming that security configurations can be retrofitted or addressed as a separate, post-deployment initiative. The correct answer is C. Integrate security policies and configurations directly into vRealize automation blueprints and leverage its policy engine to enforce compliance during the provisioning lifecycle. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a common challenge in cloud management and automation, where the need for rapid deployment and resource provisioning clashes with the imperative of maintaining robust security posture and compliance. The pressure to deliver services quickly can lead to shortcuts that bypass established security controls, creating vulnerabilities. Professionals must balance agility with security and compliance, requiring a nuanced understanding of both the technical capabilities of VMware vRealize automation, now area automation, and the relevant regulatory frameworks. The challenge lies in identifying and implementing automation workflows that are both efficient and secure, without compromising data integrity or regulatory adherence. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves leveraging vRealize automation's built-in policy and governance features, specifically focusing on blueprint-level security configurations and integration with existing security tools. This aligns with best practices for cloud automation by embedding security into the automation lifecycle from the outset. By defining security requirements within blueprints, administrators ensure that every deployed resource adheres to predefined security standards, such as network segmentation, access controls, and encryption. Integrating with external security tools allows for continuous monitoring and enforcement, providing an auditable trail and proactive threat detection. This proactive, policy-driven approach is crucial for meeting regulatory requirements that mandate secure configurations and continuous compliance monitoring. Incorrect approaches analysis. An approach that relies solely on manual security checks after deployment is fundamentally flawed. This reactive method is inefficient, prone to human error, and fails to address the core principle of security by design. It creates a significant compliance risk, as it's difficult to guarantee that all deployed resources meet security baselines consistently, leading to potential violations of regulations that require documented security controls and regular audits. Another incorrect approach is to disable or bypass security policies within vRealize automation to expedite deployment. This directly contravenes the purpose of governance features and introduces significant security vulnerabilities. Such an action would be a clear violation of regulatory requirements that mandate the implementation and enforcement of security controls, potentially leading to severe penalties and data breaches. Finally, an approach that prioritizes speed over comprehensive configuration management, leading to inconsistent deployments, is also problematic. Inconsistent configurations make it challenging to maintain a secure and compliant environment. Regulatory frameworks often require standardized and auditable configurations, and this approach undermines that requirement, increasing the risk of noncompliance and security incidents. Professional reasoning. Professionals should adopt a risk-based approach, prioritizing security and compliance as foundational elements of any automation strategy. The decision-making process should involve 1. Understanding the specific regulatory landscape applicable to the organization's data and operations. 2. Mapping these regulatory requirements to technical controls within vRealize automation and other security tools. 3. Designing automation workflows that incorporate these controls by default, using blueprints and policies. 4. Implementing continuous monitoring and auditing mechanisms to ensure ongoing compliance. 5. Regularly reviewing and updating automation policies and security configurations to adapt to evolving threats and regulatory changes. This systematic process ensures that automation enhances efficiency without compromising security or compliance. Question 3. Governance review demonstrates that the cloud environment is experiencing an increasing number of resource provisioning requests that bypass established security baselines and cost control measures, leading to potential compliance risks and budget overruns. The current process relies heavily on manual checks after deployment, which are proving insufficient and time-consuming. What is the most effective approach to address these governance gaps and ensure consistent adherence to policies for all future resource deployments? Option A. Implement a policy-as-code strategy within VMware Area Automation to define and enforce guardrails for resource provisioning, ensuring that all deployments adhere to predefined security, compliance, and cost parameters. Option B. Enhance the existing post-deployment audit procedures to increase the frequency and depth of checks, and establish a dedicated team for remediation of non-compliant resources. Option C. Introduce a mandatory manual review and approval process for every resource provisioning request before it is executed, regardless of its nature or complexity. Option D. Acquire and deploy a separate compliance monitoring tool that can scan the environment for non-compliant resources and generate alerts for manual intervention. Correct answer is A. Implement a policy-as-code strategy within VMware Area Automation to define and enforce guardrails for resource provisioning, ensuring that all deployments adhere to predefined security, compliance, and cost parameters. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a common challenge in cloud management and automation, where the rapid deployment of resources, driven by business agility, can outpace the establishment and enforcement of robust governance policies. The challenge lies in balancing the need for speed with the imperative of security, compliance, and cost control. A failure to address these gaps proactively can lead to significant risks, including data breaches, regulatory noncompliance, and uncontrolled expenditure. Correct approach analysis. Implementing a policy-as-code approach using VMware Area Automation, formerly vRealize Automation, to enforce guardrails for resource provisioning is the best professional practice. This aligns with the principles of infrastructure as code ISC and DevSecOps, ensuring that security, compliance, and operational standards are embedded directly into the automation workflows. By defining these policies within area automation, they are automatically applied and enforced at the point of resource creation, preventing the deployment of non-compliant resources. This proactive approach minimizes manual intervention, reduces the risk of human error, and provides an auditable trail of policy enforcement, directly addressing the governance review's findings. This method is consistent with best practices for cloud governance and automation, as outlined in VMware's own documentation and industry standards for secure and compliant cloud operations. Incorrect approaches analysis. Deploying additional manual review steps for all resource provisioning requests introduces a bottleneck, negating the benefits of automation and agility. This approach is prone to human error, delays, and is not scalable, failing to address the root cause of the governance gap. It also represents a failure to leverage the automation platform effectively for policy enforcement, a core tenet of cloud management and automation. Focusing solely on post-deployment audits and remediation, while necessary, is a reactive measure. It does not prevent the initial deployment of non-compliant resources, leaving the organization exposed to risks for a period. This approach fails to implement preventative controls, which are far more effective and efficient in a cloud environment. Implementing a separate, disconnected compliance tool that flags non-compliant resources after deployment without integrating with the provisioning workflow is also insufficient. While it provides visibility, it does not inherently prevent the creation of these resources. The lack of integration means that remediation is still a manual or semi-automated process, and the core governance gap in the provisioning process remains unaddressed. Professional reasoning. Professionals should adopt a proactive, integrated approach to governance in cloud environments. The decision-making process should prioritize embedding controls within automation workflows rather than relying on post-deployment checks or manual interventions. This involves understanding the capabilities of the chosen cloud management platform, like VMware Area Automation, to enforce policies as code. When a governance review identifies gaps, the immediate focus should be on how to automate the enforcement of desired states and guardrails at the point of creation or modification. thereby building compliance and security into the operational fabric. Question 4. Regulatory review indicates that a company is planning to deploy VMware vSphere within a public cloud provider's infrastructure to leverage its global reach and scalability. The company's primary objective is to reduce operational costs and improve service delivery speed. However, the company has not yet confirmed if the specific public cloud provider's data center locations, where the VMware software will be hosted, are explicitly permitted by VMware's licensing agreements for such deployments, nor has it verified if these locations align with the company's own data residency obligations for sensitive customer data. Which of the following approaches best ensures compliance with VMware's licensing and relevant data sovereignty regulations? Option A. Proceed with the deployment in the public cloud provider's infrastructure, assuming that all major public cloud providers are implicitly compliant with VMware's licensing and support terms for global deployments. Option B. Deploy VMware vSphere in the public cloud provider's infrastructure without explicit verification, relying on the assumption that the cloud provider's standard terms of service cover all necessary licensing and regulatory compliance for hosted software. Option C. Proactively engage with VMware's licensing and support teams to confirm the compliance of the chosen public cloud provider's data center locations with the EULA and any applicable support contracts, while simultaneously verifying that these locations meet the company's data residency requirements. Option D. Prioritize the cost savings and speed benefits offered by the public cloud provider and address any potential licensing or data residency issues with VMware and regulatory bodies after the deployment is complete. Correct answer is C. Proactively engage with VMware's licensing and support teams to confirm the compliance of the chosen public cloud provider's data center locations with the EULA and any applicable support contracts, while simultaneously verifying that these locations meet the company's data residency requirements. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a professional challenge in managing cloud resources within a regulated environment, specifically concerning data residency and compliance with VMware's licensing and support agreements. The core difficulty lies in balancing the operational benefits of a global cloud infrastructure with the strict requirements of data sovereignty and the contractual obligations tied to VMware software. Misinterpreting or ignoring these requirements can lead to significant legal, financial, and reputational damage. The need for careful judgment arises from the potential for subtle violations that might not be immediately apparent but carry severe consequences. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves a thorough understanding of VMware's licensing terms and support policies, particularly as they relate to the geographical location of deployed virtual machines and the data they process. Best professional practice dictates that any deployment of VMware vSphere or vCloud Director in a public cloud environment must explicitly adhere to the terms of the End User License Agreement, EULA, and any associated support contracts. This includes ensuring that the chosen cloud provider's infrastructure, where the VMware software is running, complies with any data residency clauses stipulated by VMware or by the customer's own regulatory obligations. Proactive engagement with VMware's licensing and support teams to clarify any ambiguities regarding specific cloud provider integrations and geographical deployments is crucial. This demonstrates due diligence and a commitment to compliance, mitigating risks associated with unauthorized use or support eligibility issues. Incorrect approaches analysis. Deploying VMware vSphere within a public cloud provider's infrastructure without verifying that the provider's data center locations align with VMware's licensing terms or any explicit data residency requirements in the customer's contract is a significant regulatory and ethical failure. This could lead to a breach of contract with VMware, potentially invalidating support agreements and incurring penalties. It also risks violating data sovereignty laws if sensitive data is processed in unauthorized regions. Assuming that all public cloud providers are implicitly compliant with VMware's licensing and support terms without explicit verification is another failure. VMware's licensing can be nuanced, and specific agreements may dictate where their software can be deployed, especially in managed or hosted environments. This assumption can lead to unintentional noncompliance, resulting in licensing audits, fines, or the inability to receive critical support, focusing solely on the cost savings of a particular public cloud provider without considering the licensing and data residency implications of the VMware software running on that infrastructure is a critical oversight. While cost optimization is important, it cannot supersede contractual obligations and regulatory compliance. This approach prioritizes short-term financial gains over long-term legal and operational stability, leading to potential breaches of contract and regulatory violations. Professional reasoning. Professionals in cloud management and automation must adopt a risk-based approach that prioritizes compliance and contractual adherence. The decision-making process should involve 1. Identifying all relevant contractual obligations, VMware EULA, support agreements, customer contracts. 2. Understanding the regulatory landscape concerning data residency and privacy. 3. Thoroughly vetting cloud provider infrastructure and their compliance with both contractual and regulatory requirements. 4. Seeking clarification from vendors, like VMware, when there is any doubt about deployment specifics. 5. Documenting all compliance checks and decisions. This systematic approach ensures that operational goals are met without compromising legal standing or ethical responsibilities. Question 5. Stakeholder feedback indicates a strong desire to accelerate the deployment of new virtual machine blueprints through VMware Area Automation. The business unit is pushing for immediate implementation of a new self-service catalog item that allows end users to provision resources with minimal oversight. However, concerns have been raised internally regarding the potential for misconfigurations and the adherence to existing security hardening standards for these newly provisioned machines. Which of the following approaches best addresses this situation while adhering to professional best practices and regulatory considerations within the VMware Cloud Management Framework? Option A. Prioritize the stakeholder request by deploying the catalog item without any specific security or compliance checks, focusing solely on the speed of delivery and the immediate satisfaction of the business unit's request. Option B. Deploy the catalog item with a basic level of security, assuming that end users will adhere to security best practices once the resources are provisioned, and rely on manual audits to identify and correct any deviations later. Option C. Implement the new catalog item with a comprehensive security and compliance review integrated into the blueprint validation process, ensuring that all security hardening standards and relevant compliance checks are automated and enforced before the blueprint can be published and made available to end users. Option D. Proceed with the immediate deployment of the new catalog item as requested by the business unit to meet their urgent needs, and plan to address any security or compliance gaps in a subsequent patch cycle. The correct answer is D. Proceed with the immediate deployment of the new catalog item as requested by the business unit to meet their urgent needs, and plan to address any security or compliance gaps in a subsequent patch cycle. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a common challenge in cloud management and automation, balancing the desire for rapid deployment and feature iteration with the imperative to maintain robust security and compliance. Stakeholders, driven by business needs, may overlook or underestimate the implications of security vulnerabilities and regulatory adherence. The challenge lies in effectively communicating technical risks and compliance requirements to non-technical stakeholders, ensuring that business objectives do not compromise critical security postures or lead to regulatory noncompliance. The pressure to deliver quickly can create a conflict between agility and governance, requiring a skilled professional to navigate these competing priorities. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach prioritizes a thorough security and compliance review before proceeding with automation. This aligns with best practices in cloud governance and the principles of secure development lifecycles. By integrating security and compliance checks into the automation pipeline from the outset, potential risks are identified and mitigated early, preventing costly remediation efforts later. This proactive stance ensures that the automated solution adheres to relevant VMware vRealize automation, now area automation, best practices for security and compliance, as well as any applicable industry standards or internal policies. This approach demonstrates professional responsibility by safeguarding the organization's data and reputation, and by ensuring the long-term viability and trustworthiness of the automated cloud environment. It reflects a commitment to building secure and compliant automation, rather than retrofitting it. Incorrect approach is analysis. Implementing automation without a prior security and compliance review is a significant regulatory and ethical failure. It exposes the organization to potential data breaches, unauthorized access, and noncompliance with data protection regulations. This approach prioritizes speed over security, which is a direct violation of the principle of least privilege in secure system design. It also fails to uphold the professional duty to protect the organization's assets and sensitive information. Deploying automation with a fix-it-later mentality regarding security and compliance is equally problematic. This reactive approach is inefficient and significantly increases the risk of security incidents and compliance violations occurring before remediation can be implemented. It demonstrates a lack of foresight and a disregard for established security and compliance frameworks, potentially leading to reputational damage and legal repercussions. Focusing solely on stakeholder satisfaction without addressing security and compliance concerns is a critical ethical lapse. While stakeholder satisfaction is important, it cannot come at the expense of organizational security and regulatory adherence. This approach neglects the professional obligation to act in the best interest of the organization as a whole, which includes protecting it from security threats and legal penalties. Professional reasoning. Professionals in cloud management and automation must adopt a risk-based decision-making framework. This involves 1. Identifying and assessing potential risks associated with any proposed automation. 2. Evaluating the impact of these risks against organizational security policies and regulatory requirements. 3. Prioritizing mitigation strategies that align with both business objectives and compliance mandates. 4. Communicating risks and proposed solutions clearly to stakeholders, emphasizing the long-term benefits of a secure and compliant approach. 5. Integrating security and compliance checks as non-negotiable steps within the automation development and deployment lifecycle. This systematic approach ensures that automation initiatives are not only efficient, but also secure, compliant, and sustainable. Question 6. The audit findings indicate that several cloud administrators have been granted excessive permissions within the vRealize automation, area automation, environment, potentially allowing them to perform actions beyond their defined job responsibilities. Which of the following actions represents the most appropriate and secure remediation strategy? Option A. Document the current permissions as is, assuming the audit finding is a false positive and no immediate action is required. Option B. Immediately assign a highly restrictive, read-only role to all cloud administrators to prevent any further potential misuse of privileges. Option C. Review and refine existing role assignments to ensure they adhere to the principle of least privilege, creating custom roles or assigning predefined roles that precisely match the documented responsibilities of each administrator. Option D. Revert all user permissions to the default administrator role to ensure everyone has the necessary access to manage the environment effectively. The correct answer is C. Review and refine existing role assignments to ensure they adhere to the principle of least privilege, creating custom roles or assigning predefined roles that precisely match the documented responsibilities of each administrator. Explanation. The audit findings indicate a potential misconfiguration in the vRealize automation, now area automation, environment, specifically concerning the role-based access control RBAC for cloud administrators. This scenario is professionally challenging because it directly impacts security, compliance, and operational efficiency. Improperly assigned permissions can lead to unauthorized access, accidental or malicious changes to critical infrastructure, and a failure to meet audit requirements. The core of the challenge lies in balancing the need for operational flexibility with the imperative of maintaining a secure and compliant cloud environment. The correct approach involves a thorough review of the existing RBAC assignments against the principle of least privilege and the documented roles and responsibilities within the organization. This aligns with best practices for cloud security and governance, ensuring that individuals only have the permissions necessary to perform their defined job functions. In the context of VMware's cloud management solutions, this translates to configuring roles within area automation that precisely match these requirements, thereby minimizing the attack surface and preventing unauthorized actions. This proactive and principle-based approach is crucial for maintaining a secure and auditable cloud infrastructure. An incorrect approach would be to simply revert all permissions to a default or overly permissive state. This fails to address the root cause of the audit finding and introduces significant security risks by granting excessive privileges. It violates the principle of least privilege and increases the likelihood of unauthorized modifications or data breaches, which would be a direct contravention of security best practices and potentially regulatory requirements for data protection and access control. Another incorrect approach would be to ignore the audit finding and assume the current configuration is acceptable. This demonstrates a lack of diligence and a disregard for established governance and security protocols. It leaves the organization vulnerable to the very risks the audit aims to mitigate and could lead to further compliance issues and potential penalties. This approach is professionally negligent and undermines the integrity of the cloud management system. A third incorrect approach would be to implement a quick fix without understanding the underlying issue, such as assigning a broad administrative role to all users who reported issues. This is a reactive and potentially dangerous solution that exacerbates the problem by granting unnecessary privileges, directly contradicting the principle of least privilege and increasing the risk of security incidents. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a systematic approach. First, understand the specific audit finding and its implication. Second, consult relevant documentation, policies, and best practices, e.g., VMware security guidelines, organizational security policies. Third, analyze the current configuration in detail, identifying the specific deviations from best practices. Fourth, develop a remediation plan that addresses the root cause, adheres to the principle of least privilege, and minimizes disruption. Finally, implement the changes, thoroughly test them, and document the process for future reference in audits. Question 7. Implementation of a new microservice for customer analytics requires integration with the existing VMware vRealize automation environment. The development team has provided the service code and initial deployment scripts, but they are requesting expedited deployment due to a critical business deadline. Automated security scanning and policy validation steps are currently part of the standard CI/CD pipeline for new service deployments. What is the most appropriate course of action to ensure both timely delivery and robust security? Option A. Integrate the microservice into the CI/CD pipeline, ensuring that the automated security scanning and policy validation steps are completed, and any identified critical vulnerabilities are remediated before the service is deployed to the production environment, even if this requires a slight adjustment to the original timeline. Option B. Deploy the microservice without performing the automated security scanning and policy validation, relying on the assumption that the service provider's security measures are adequate and the business deadline is paramount. Option C. Proceed with the expedited deployment of the microservice, ensuring that automated security scanning and policy validation are performed immediately after deployment in the production environment. Option D. Manually review the security configurations of the microservice and its integration points after deployment to production, as this is a quicker alternative to automated checks when facing tight deadlines. The correct answer is C. Proceed with the expedited deployment of the microservice, ensuring that automated security scanning and policy validation are performed immediately after deployment in the production environment. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a common challenge in cloud automation, where the integration of a new service introduces potential security vulnerabilities. The core difficulty lies in balancing the need for rapid deployment and feature enablement with the imperative to maintain a secure and compliant infrastructure. The pressure to deliver new functionality quickly can lead to shortcuts in security validation, which, if not managed properly, can expose the organization to significant risks, including data breaches, service disruptions, and regulatory noncompliance. The challenge is amplified by the distributed nature of cloud environments and the complexity of modern automation tools, making it difficult to have complete visibility into all potential attack vectors. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach emphasizes a proactive and integrated security posture within the automation lifecycle. By incorporating security scanning and policy validation as mandatory steps within the CI/CD pipeline for the new service, the organization ensures that potential vulnerabilities are identified and remediated before the service is deployed to production. This aligns with the principle of shift-left security, a best practice in modern IT operations. Specifically, this approach adheres to the principles of secure development and deployment, which are implicitly expected within the operational guidelines for cloud management and automation. It demonstrates due diligence in risk management by embedding security checks at the earliest possible stage, thereby minimizing the likelihood of introducing insecure configurations or code. This proactive stance is crucial for maintaining the integrity and confidentiality of data and services, which are fundamental to operational stability and trust. Incorrect approach is analysis. One incorrect approach involves deploying the service and then relying solely on post-deployment security audits. This is a reactive measure that fails to prevent potential breaches during the interim period between deployment and audit. It represents a significant regulatory and ethical failure because it knowingly accepts a higher risk profile without immediate mitigation. This approach neglects the responsibility to protect sensitive data and maintain service availability, potentially violating internal security policies and external compliance mandates that require continuous security monitoring and risk reduction. Another incorrect approach is to bypass the automated security checks due to time constraints, assuming the service provider's inherent security is sufficient. This is a critical failure as it abdicates responsibility for the security of the deployed application and its integration with the existing environment. Relying solely on third-party security without independent validation is a breach of due diligence and can lead to unforeseen vulnerabilities arising from misconfigurations or integration issues. Ethically, it demonstrates a lack of commitment to safeguarding the organization's assets and customer data. A third incorrect approach, which is to manually review security configurations after deployment, is also insufficient. While manual review can catch some issues, it is prone to human error, is time-consuming, and cannot scale effectively in a dynamic cloud environment. It fails to provide the consistent and comprehensive coverage that automated checks offer, increasing the risk of overlooked vulnerabilities. This approach is professionally unsound, as it relies on an inefficient and unreliable method for security assurance, potentially leading to compliance violations and security incidents. Professional reasoning. Professionals in cloud management and automation must adopt a risk-based approach that prioritizes security throughout the entire lifecycle of a service. This involves establishing clear security gates within automation workflows, conducting thorough risk assessments for new integrations, and ensuring that security is not an afterthought but an integral part of the design and deployment process. The decision-making process should always favor proactive security measures over reactive ones, even when faced with time pressures. This requires strong communication with stakeholders about the importance of security, advocating for adequate resources for security testing, and fostering a culture of security awareness within the team. When faced with a conflict between speed and security, the professional's duty is to identify and mitigate the risks associated with the faster path, rather than compromising on security standards. Question 8. System analysis indicates that a new development team requires rapid provisioning of virtual machines for testing a new application in a highly regulated financial services environment. The automation team is under pressure to deliver these resources quickly, and there are concerns that implementing all security and compliance checks within the provisioning workflow will significantly delay the process. What is the most appropriate approach to ensure both rapid deployment and adherence to regulatory requirements? Option A. Proceed with rapid provisioning of virtual machines using default security settings and schedule manual security audits to be performed after deployment. Option B. Rely on the development team to manually implement all necessary security configurations and compliance checks on the provisioned virtual machines before using them for testing. Option C. Integrate automated security and compliance validation checks directly into the virtual machine provisioning workflow, ensuring that resources are only deployed if they meet predefined security baselines and regulatory mandates. Option D. Temporarily disable certain security checks within the automation tool to expedite the provisioning process, with a plan to re-enable them once the initial development phase is complete. The correct answer is C. Integrate automated security and compliance validation checks directly into the virtual machine provisioning workflow, ensuring that resources are only deployed if they meet predefined security baselines and regulatory mandates. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a common challenge in cloud management and automation, balancing the need for rapid deployment and resource provisioning with the imperative of maintaining robust security and compliance. The pressure to deliver services quickly can lead to shortcuts that bypass established security controls, creating significant risks. The professional challenge lies in navigating these competing demands, ensuring that automation solutions do not inadvertently introduce vulnerabilities or violate regulatory requirements. The specific context of a regulated industry, implied by the need for compliance, amplifies the consequences of non-compliance. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves integrating security and compliance checks directly into the automation workflows. This means that before any new virtual machine or service is provisioned, the automation system must verify that the proposed configuration adheres to predefined security baselines and regulatory mandates. This proactive, shift-left security model ensures that compliance is built into the infrastructure from the outset, rather than being an afterthought. This aligns with best practices in DevSecOps and cloud security, where automation is leveraged to enforce policies consistently and at scale. From a regulatory perspective, this approach demonstrates due diligence and a commitment to maintaining a compliant environment, which is crucial in industries with strict data protection and privacy laws. Incorrect approach is analysis. One incorrect approach is to rely solely on manual post-provisioning audits. This is reactive and inefficient. By the time a manual audit identifies a compliance issue, the vulnerable system may have already been exposed or used, leading to potential data breaches or regulatory penalties. This approach fails to leverage the power of automation for proactive risk mitigation and can be seen as a failure to implement reasonable security controls. Another incorrect approach is to disable or bypass security checks within the automation tool to speed up deployments. This is a direct violation of security policies and potentially regulatory requirements. It prioritizes speed over security and compliance, creating a significant attack surface and exposing the organization to severe risks, including financial penalties, reputational damage, and legal liabilities. This demonstrates a lack of professional responsibility and a disregard for established security best practices. A third incorrect approach is to assume that the default configurations of the automation tool are inherently compliant. Automation tools, while powerful, are not infallible and often require customization to meet specific organizational security and regulatory needs. Relying on defaults without validation is a form of negligence and can lead to the deployment of insecure or non-compliant infrastructure. Professional reasoning. Professionals in cloud management and automation must adopt a risk-based approach. This involves understanding the potential threats and vulnerabilities associated with their automated processes and implementing controls to mitigate those risks. The decision-making process should prioritize security and compliance by design. This means actively seeking out and integrating security and compliance requirements into the automation strategy from the initial planning stages. When faced with pressure to expedite deployments, professionals should advocate for the necessary time and resources to implement security and compliance measures correctly, rather than compromising on these critical aspects. They should also continuously monitor and audit their automated systems to ensure ongoing adherence to policies and regulations. Question 9. Market research demonstrates that organizations are increasingly leveraging automation for cloud resource provisioning. A critical aspect of this automation is ensuring adherence to specific regulatory mandates governing data handling and infrastructure deployment. Given the complexity and evolving nature of these regulations, which of the following approaches best ensures that automated provisioning processes remain compliant with applicable laws and guidelines? Option A. Prioritizing the speed and efficiency of automated deployments, with a plan to address any compliance issues that arise in subsequent manual reviews. Option B. Conducting comprehensive manual audits of deployed resources on a quarterly basis to identify and rectify any compliance deviations. Option C. Implementing automated checks and balances within the provisioning scripts and policies to enforce regulatory requirements before and during resource deployment. Option D. Relying on the cloud provider's default security configurations, assuming they meet all industry-specific regulatory obligations. The correct answer is C. Implementing automated checks and balances within the provisioning scripts and policies to enforce regulatory requirements before and during resource deployment. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a common challenge in cloud management and automation, where the rapid adoption of new services and technologies can outpace the development and implementation of robust compliance frameworks. The professional is tasked with ensuring that automated provisioning processes adhere to specific regulatory requirements, which are often complex and subject to change. The challenge lies in balancing the need for agility and efficiency in cloud operations with the imperative of maintaining regulatory compliance, especially when dealing with sensitive data or critical infrastructure. Misinterpreting or overlooking specific regulatory mandates can lead to significant legal, financial, and reputational damage. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves a proactive and systematic integration of regulatory requirements into the design and implementation of automation workflows. This means thoroughly understanding the specific mandates applicable to the organization's industry and geographic location, and then translating these into concrete technical controls within the automation scripts and policies. For example, if a regulation dictates data residency requirements, the automation must be configured to provision resources only in approved geographical regions. This approach represents best professional practice because it embeds compliance from the outset, reducing the risk of post-deployment remediation and ensuring that the automated environment is inherently compliant. It aligns with the principle of compliance by design and demonstrates a commitment to responsible cloud governance. Incorrect approaches analysis. One incorrect approach involves relying solely on manual audits after the automation has been deployed. This is a reactive measure that fails to prevent non-compliant deployments. It represents a significant regulatory and ethical failure because it allows potential violations to occur before detection, increasing the likelihood of penalties and data breaches. It also signifies a lack of due diligence in the design phase. Another incorrect approach is to assume that generic cloud security best practices automatically satisfy all specific regulatory requirements. While general security measures are important, they often do not address the granular and specific mandates of particular regulations, e.g., specific data retention periods, encryption standards, or access control mechanisms mandated by law. This approach is professionally unacceptable as it demonstrates a superficial understanding of compliance obligations and a failure to perform the necessary due diligence to identify and address specific regulatory obligations. A third incorrect approach is to prioritize speed of deployment over thorough validation of compliance controls within the automation. This can lead to the rapid rollout of non-compliant infrastructure, creating a larger problem to fix later. It is a failure of professional responsibility, as the primary duty includes ensuring that automated processes operate within legal and ethical boundaries, not just efficiently. Professional reasoning. Professionals in cloud management and automation must adopt a risk-based approach to compliance. This involves 1. Identifying all applicable regulatory frameworks relevant to the organization's operations and data. 2. Translating these regulatory requirements into specific, actionable technical controls and policy definitions. 3. Integrating these controls directly into the design and implementation of automation workflows, using tools and scripting languages that support policy enforcement. 4. Establishing continuous monitoring and auditing mechanisms to verify ongoing compliance and detect deviations. 5. Maintaining clear documentation of compliance efforts and automation configurations. This systematic process ensures that compliance is not an afterthought but a fundamental aspect of cloud operations, fostering trust and mitigating risks. Question 10. The efficiency study reveals that the VMware vRealize automation, VRA, deployment is experiencing suboptimal resource utilization, leading to increased operational costs. However, the study also flags potential risks related to data sovereignty, as some automated deployments might be inadvertently provisioning resources in regions outside the organization's approved geographical boundaries. The cloud administrator needs to address the cost inefficiency while ensuring strict adherence to data residency mandates. Option A. Reconfigure VRA's resource profiles and blueprints to explicitly enforce data residency constraints, ensuring that all provisioned resources are located within the approved geographical regions, and then optimize resource allocation within those compliant regions to address cost inefficiencies. Option B. Immediately implement a broad resource optimization strategy across the VRA environment to reduce operational costs, assuming that the existing data residency configurations are sufficient and will not be impacted by the optimization. Option C. Focus solely on improving the efficiency of resource allocation without investigating or confirming the data residency implications, as the primary goal is cost reduction. Option D. Disable data residency checks within VRA to streamline resource provisioning and improve efficiency, and address any potential compliance issues retrospectively if they arise. The correct answer is A. Reconfigure VRA's resource profiles and blueprints to explicitly enforce data residency constraints, ensuring that all provisioned resources are located within the approved geographical regions, and then optimize resource allocation within those compliant regions to address cost inefficiencies. Explanation: the efficiency study reveals a significant discrepancy in resource allocation within the cloud management platform, directly impacting compliance with data residency regulations. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires balancing operational efficiency gains with strict adherence to legal and regulatory mandates. The cloud administrator must not only identify the root cause of the inefficiency, but also implement a solution that guarantees data remains within the designated geographical boundaries, as stipulated by relevant VMware-specific compliance frameworks and general cloud service provider agreements, which are implicitly governed by the exam's jurisdiction. The correct approach involves a thorough review of the cloud management platform's configuration, specifically focusing on the data storage policies and network ingress/egress rules. This approach represents best professional practice because it directly addresses the identified inefficiency while prioritizing regulatory compliance. By ensuring that data is routed and stored according to defined geographical constraints, the administrator upholds the integrity of the compliance posture, avoids potential legal repercussions, and maintains customer trust. This aligns with the principles of responsible cloud management and the explicit requirements often found in VMware's own compliance documentation and best practice guides, which are the assumed regulatory framework for this exam. An incorrect approach would be to implement a quick fix for the resource allocation issue without verifying its impact on data residency. For instance, simply reallocating resources to improve performance without confirming that data remains within the approved geographical zones constitutes a significant regulatory failure. This could lead to violations of data protection laws, resulting in substantial fines and reputational damage. Another incorrect approach would be to ignore the efficiency study's findings altogether, assuming that current configurations are compliant. This demonstrates a lack of due diligence and a failure to proactively manage compliance risks, which is ethically and professionally unacceptable. A third incorrect approach might involve making assumptions about data location based on general network topology without consulting specific policy configurations, leading to potential misinterpretations and non-compliance. Professionals should adopt a decision-making framework that begins with understanding the regulatory landscape relevant to the cloud environment. This involves identifying all applicable data residency laws and contractual obligations. Next, they must thoroughly investigate the technical implementation to pinpoint the source of the inefficiency and assess its compliance implications. Solutions should then be designed and implemented with compliance as a primary, non-negotiable requirement. Continuous monitoring and auditing are crucial to ensure ongoing adherence to regulations. Question 11. Investigation of a new VMware vRealize Automation (VRA) deployment intended to automate the provisioning of development environments reveals that the chosen configuration might not fully align with the organization's internal data residency policies, which are themselves influenced by specific industry regulations. The IT team is eager to proceed with the deployment to meet development team deadlines. Which of the following actions best demonstrates a commitment to regulatory compliance and professional responsibility? Option A. Rely solely on the vendor's documentation for VRA, which states it supports various deployment models to confirm compliance with internal data residency policies. Option B. Halt the VRA deployment and initiate a formal review process involving the compliance and legal departments to assess the configuration against data residency policies and relevant regulations before proceeding. Option C. Proceed with the VRA deployment as planned, assuming the data residency requirements are flexible for development environments and can be addressed later if issues arise. Option D. Implement the VRA deployment with a temporary workaround for data residency, planning to implement a permanent solution after the initial deployment is complete and the development deadlines are met. The correct answer is C. Proceed with the VRA deployment as planned, assuming the data residency requirements are flexible for development environments and can be addressed later if issues arise. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge due to the inherent tension between rapid cloud adoption and the imperative of maintaining regulatory compliance within the VMware cloud management and automation framework. The organization's desire to leverage new services quickly, coupled with the complexity of understanding and applying specific VMware-related compliance controls, necessitates a structured and informed approach. Careful judgment is required to balance innovation with risk mitigation. The correct approach represents best professional practice because it prioritizes a thorough understanding of the relevant regulatory framework and its specific implications for the chosen VMware cloud services. By engaging with compliance teams and conducting a detailed assessment of the service's alignment with established controls, the organization ensures that its cloud deployment adheres to legal and industry standards. This proactive stance minimizes the risk of noncompliance, potential fines, and reputational damage. It demonstrates a commitment to responsible cloud governance, which is a cornerstone of secure and sustainable cloud operation. An incorrect approach that involves deploying the service without a proper compliance review fails to uphold regulatory obligations. This oversight can lead to significant legal and financial repercussions, including penalties for violating data privacy laws or industry-specific regulations. It also exposes the organization to security vulnerabilities that could be exploited, resulting in data breaches and loss of customer trust. Another incorrect approach, which relies solely on the vendor's assurances without independent verification, is professionally unacceptable. While vendor documentation is important, it does not absolve the organization of its responsibility to ensure compliance within its own operational environment. This can lead to a false sense of security and mask underlying compliance gaps. A further incorrect approach, which involves attempting to retroactively address compliance issues after deployment, is inefficient and risky. Remediation efforts after the fact are often more costly and disruptive than proactive compliance measures. It also increases the likelihood of overlooking critical issues during the initial deployment phase, leading to ongoing compliance challenges. The professional reasoning process for such situations should involve a multi-stage approach. 1. Identify the regulatory landscape applicable to the organization and the specific cloud services being considered. 2. Engage relevant stakeholders, including compliance officers, legal counsel, and security teams, early in the decision-making process. 3. Conduct a comprehensive risk assessment that evaluates the potential impact of noncompliance. 4. Develop and implement a clear compliance strategy that integrates with the cloud adoption roadmap. 5. Establish ongoing monitoring and auditing mechanisms to ensure continuous adherence to regulatory requirements. Question 12. What factors determine the effectiveness of integrating regulatory compliance checks within automated cloud provisioning and configuration workflows in a VMware vRealize automation environment? Option A. The granularity and accuracy of compliance policies defined as code, their seamless integration into the CI/CD pipeline, and the establishment of automated remediation or alerting mechanisms for detected deviations. Option B. The frequency of manual audits performed on deployed cloud resources and the number of compliance reports generated by external auditing tools. Option C. The extent to which compliance checks are performed only during major system upgrades or at the end of quarterly review cycles. Option D. The reliance on post-deployment manual review of system logs and the subjective interpretation of compliance requirements by individual administrators. The correct answer is A. The granularity and accuracy of compliance policies defined as code, their seamless integration into the CI/CD pipeline, and the establishment of automated remediation or alerting mechanisms for detected deviations. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a common challenge in cloud management and automation, ensuring that automated deployments and configurations adhere to evolving regulatory compliance requirements without manual oversight for every change. The difficulty lies in the dynamic nature of cloud environments and the potential for automated processes to inadvertently introduce noncompliance. Professionals must balance the efficiency gains of automation with the imperative of regulatory adherence, which often involves interpreting and applying complex legal and industry standards to technical implementations. The challenge is amplified when the regulatory framework itself is subject to interpretation or updates, requiring continuous vigilance and adaptation of automated policies. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves integrating regulatory compliance checks directly into the automation workflows and the CI/CD pipeline. This means leveraging VMware vRealize Automation, now Area Automation, or similar tools to define and enforce compliance policies as code. These policies should be derived from the specific regulatory framework applicable to the organization's operations. By embedding these checks, any deviation from compliance during automated provisioning or configuration changes will be detected and flagged, or even prevented, before it impacts the production environment. This proactive approach aligns with the principle of compliance by design and is the most effective way to maintain adherence to regulatory mandates in an automated cloud environment. It ensures that automation serves to reinforce, rather than undermine, compliance efforts. Incorrect approaches analysis. A purely manual review of audit logs after deployment is insufficient because it is reactive. By the time a manual review identifies a compliance issue, the non-compliant system may have already been in use, potentially leading to breaches, fines, or reputational damage. This approach fails to leverage the capabilities of automation for preventative control and is therefore professionally unacceptable from a risk management perspective. Relying solely on external compliance auditing tools without integrating them into the automation workflow creates a similar reactive problem. While these tools can identify issues, they do not prevent them from occurring in the first place through automated processes. The gap between the audit findings and the automated deployment process means that non-compliance can persist until the next audit cycle, which is too slow for dynamic cloud environments. Implementing compliance checks only during major system upgrades or infrequent audits is also a failure. Cloud environments are constantly changing due to automated deployments and updates. Waiting for infrequent checks means that numerous small, automated changes could accumulate to create significant compliance risks between these checks. This sporadic approach does not provide the continuous assurance required by most regulatory frameworks. Professional reasoning. Professionals must adopt a proactive and integrated approach to regulatory compliance in cloud automation. The decision-making process should prioritize embedding compliance controls within the automation lifecycle. This involves understanding the specific regulatory requirements, translating them into machine-readable policies, and integrating these policies into the automation platform and CI/CD pipelines. When faced with a choice, always select the option that enables continuous automated enforcement of compliance rules, rather than relying on manual, post-deployment, or infrequent checks. This systematic integration minimizes risk and ensures that automation contributes to a secure and compliant cloud posture. Question 13. When evaluating the implementation of a new VMware vRealize automation solution designed to automate the provisioning of virtual machines containing sensitive customer data, which approach best ensures adherence to regulatory compliance requirements? Option A. Engage the organization's legal and compliance departments early in the design phase to review the automation workflows and data handling procedures against relevant data protection regulations before deployment. Option B. Prioritize rapid deployment to meet business demands, with a plan to address any compliance issues identified post-implementation. Option C. Implement the automation solution with minimal configuration, relying on the default security settings provided by VMware to satisfy compliance needs. Option D. Proceed with the automation deployment after a brief internal review by the IT security team, assuming standard security controls are sufficient. The correct answer is D. Proceed with the automation deployment after a brief internal review by the IT security team, assuming standard security controls are sufficient. Explanation. This scenario presents a common challenge in cloud management and automation, balancing the need for rapid deployment and innovation with the imperative of regulatory compliance. The professional is tasked with implementing a new automation solution that touches sensitive data, requiring adherence to specific data handling and privacy regulations. The challenge lies in ensuring that the automation, while efficient, does not inadvertently create compliance gaps or expose the organization to regulatory penalties. Careful judgment is required to select an approach that prioritizes security and compliance without stifling the benefits of automation. Correct approach represents best professional practice because it proactively integrates compliance requirements into the design and implementation of the automation solution. This aligns with the principle of privacy by design and security by design, which are fundamental to many regulatory frameworks. By engaging legal and compliance teams early, the professional ensures that the automation adheres to all applicable data protection laws and internal policies. This proactive stance minimizes the risk of noncompliance, which can lead to significant fines, reputational damage, and operational disruptions. An incorrect approach that overlooks the need for legal and compliance review before deployment is professionally unacceptable. This failure constitutes a direct violation of regulatory obligations to protect sensitive data and maintain privacy. Such an approach demonstrates a lack of due diligence and a disregard for the potential legal and ethical ramifications of non-compliant automation. It exposes the organization to significant risks, including data breaches, unauthorized access, and misuse of personal information, all of which carry severe penalties under relevant regulations. Another incorrect approach that prioritizes speed of deployment over thorough security and compliance vetting is equally problematic. While agility is valued in cloud environments, it must not come at the expense of fundamental compliance. This approach risks introducing vulnerabilities or non-compliant data handling practices that could be exploited, leading to regulatory scrutiny and enforcement actions. It suggests a short-sighted focus on immediate project goals without considering the long-term implications for the organization's legal standing and data integrity. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a structured risk assessment that explicitly includes regulatory compliance. This process should begin with identifying all applicable regulations and internal policies. Next, the potential impact of the automation on sensitive data and compliance requirements must be thoroughly analyzed. Collaboration with legal, compliance, and security teams is crucial throughout the design, development, and deployment phases. Finally, ongoing monitoring and auditing of the automated processes are essential to ensure continued adherence to regulatory standards. Question 14. Operational review demonstrates that the automated provisioning of virtual machines and cloud resources using VMware vRealize automation is significantly outpacing the organization's ability to ensure adherence to data residency and privacy regulations. The current process involves manual checks after deployment, leading to delays and occasional non-compliant deployments. Which approach best addresses this regulatory compliance challenge within the automated cloud management framework? Option A. Rely on the cloud provider's inherent compliance certification to satisfy all data residency and privacy regulations, assuming their infrastructure meets all necessary standards. Option B. Integrate automated compliance checks directly into the vRealize automation blueprint and approval workflows, ensuring that resource deployments are validated against predefined regulatory policies before provisioning is finalized. Option C. Implement a strict moratorium on all new automated resource provisioning until a comprehensive manual review process for all regulatory requirements can be established and fully staffed. Option D. Increase the frequency and scope of manual post-deployment audits to catch non-compliant resources more effectively, while continuing with the current automated provisioning process. The correct answer is B. Integrate automated compliance checks directly into the vRealize automation blueprint and approval workflows, ensuring that resource deployments are validated against predefined regulatory policies before provisioning is finalized. Explanation. The scenario presents a common challenge in cloud management and automation, balancing the need for rapid deployment and innovation with the imperative of regulatory compliance. Specifically, the challenge lies in ensuring that automated provisioning processes adhere to data residency and privacy regulations without becoming a bottleneck to business agility. The professional must navigate the technical complexities of VMware vRealize automation, now area automation, and its integration with underlying infrastructure, while simultaneously understanding and applying relevant regulatory frameworks. The correct approach represents best professional practice because it proactively embeds compliance checks into the automation workflow. This ensures that every deployment, regardless of how automated, is validated against regulatory requirements before it goes live. This aligns with the principle of compliance by design, a cornerstone of modern regulatory adherence. By leveraging vRealize Automation's capabilities for policy enforcement and integration with external compliance tools, the organization can achieve both speed and security. This approach minimizes the risk of regulatory violations, which can lead to significant financial penalties, reputational damage, and operational disruption. An incorrect approach that bypasses automated compliance checks during provisioning is professionally unacceptable. This represents a significant regulatory failure because it creates a blind spot, allowing non-compliant resources to be deployed without detection. This directly violates the principle of due diligence and proactive risk management, mandated by most regulatory frameworks governing data handling and cloud services. It also creates an ethical failure by potentially exposing sensitive data to unauthorized access or processing in non-compliant regions, thereby breaching trust with customers and stakeholders. Another incorrect approach, which relies solely on manual post-deployment audits, is also professionally deficient. While audits are necessary, relying on them as the primary compliance mechanism for automated provisioning is reactive rather than proactive. This approach fails to prevent non-compliant deployments from occurring in the first place, increasing the likelihood of violations. The regulatory failure lies in the lack of preventative controls within the automated pipeline. Ethically, it demonstrates a lack of commitment to embedding compliance into the operational fabric, potentially leading to a culture where compliance is seen as an afterthought rather than an integral part of operations. The professional decision-making process should involve a thorough understanding of the applicable regulatory landscape, e.g., GDPR, CCPA, or specific industry regulations relevant to the exam's jurisdiction. This understanding must then be translated into technical requirements for the automation platform. The process involves 1. Identifying all relevant compliance controls that need to be enforced during provisioning. 2. Designing automation workflows that incorporate these controls as mandatory steps. 3. Implementing mechanisms for continuous monitoring and reporting of compliance status. 4. Establishing clear escalation procedures for any detected noncompliance. This systematic, integrated approach ensures that automation serves as a tool for enforcing compliance, not circumventing it. Question 15. The performance metrics show a significant increase in resource utilization and a corresponding decrease in application response times within the VMware vRealize Automation (VRA) environment. An audit log review reveals a recent surge in deployments of a specific blueprint that has been flagged for potential resource inefficiency in previous, less critical performance reviews. What is the most appropriate course of action to address this situation while adhering to regulatory compliance and IT governance best practices? Option A. Manually adjust the resource configurations of individual virtual machines deployed by the flagged blueprint to alleviate immediate performance bottlenecks, bypassing the standard change control procedures for urgent fixes. Option B. Immediately initiate a rollback of all recent deployments of the flagged blueprint and conduct a thorough investigation into its resource consumption profile, following the established change management process for any subsequent remediation or redeployment. Option C. Disable VRA's auditing and logging features for the affected services to reduce overhead and improve performance, while simultaneously investigating the blueprint's resource usage. Option D. Temporarily increase the resource allocation limits for all services experiencing performance degradation to restore acceptable response times, and schedule a separate review of the flagged blueprint at a later date. The correct answer is B. Immediately initiate a rollback of all recent deployments of the flagged blueprint and conduct a thorough investigation into its resource consumption profile, following the established change management process for any subsequent remediation or redeployment. Explanation: the performance metrics show a significant increase in resource utilization and a corresponding decrease in application response times within the VMware vRealize Automation (VRA) environment. This scenario is professionally challenging because it directly impacts service delivery and potentially violates service-level agreements (SLAs) that are often underpinned by regulatory compliance requirements related to availability and performance. The challenge lies in identifying the root cause of the degradation, while ensuring that any remediation actions do not inadvertently introduce new compliance risks or violate established governance policies. The correct approach involves a systematic investigation that prioritizes adherence to the established governance framework and change management processes. This includes leveraging VRA's built-in logging and auditing capabilities to trace resource allocation and deployment activities, cross-referencing these with infrastructure logs and security event data. By analyzing the audit trails, one can identify unauthorized or misconfigured deployments that are consuming excessive resources, thereby impacting performance. This method aligns with best practices for IT governance and regulatory compliance, as it relies on documented procedures, auditability, and a controlled approach to problem resolution. It ensures that any changes made are traceable, justifiable, and do not contravene the principles of least privilege or resource allocation policies mandated by internal governance or external regulations that might dictate resource management and operational efficiency. An incorrect approach would be to immediately implement broad-stroke resource adjustments or disable security controls without proper authorization or impact assessment. For instance, indiscriminately increasing resource limits for all affected services without understanding the specific cause could lead to uncontrolled cost escalation and potentially violate budgetary or resource allocation regulations. Similarly, disabling security monitoring or auditing features to improve performance is a severe regulatory and ethical failure. It directly undermines the ability to detect and respond to security incidents, which is a fundamental requirement of many compliance frameworks, and it compromises the integrity of the audit trail, making it impossible to demonstrate compliance or investigate future issues. Another incorrect approach is to bypass the established change management process to implement quick fixes. This not only increases the risk of unintended consequences, but also violates the principles of controlled IT operations and governance, which are essential for maintaining a compliant and stable environment. A professional decision-making process in such situations should involve 1. Acknowledging the performance degradation and its potential impact. 2. Consulting the established VRA governance policies and change management procedures. 3. Utilizing VRA's auditing and logging features to gather evidence of recent activities and resource consumption patterns. 4. Identifying the specific deployments or configurations causing the issue through data analysis. 5. Proposing and implementing a solution through the formal change management process, ensuring all actions are documented and approved. 6. Verifying the resolution and updating documentation as necessary. This structured approach ensures that performance issues are addressed effectively while maintaining regulatory adherence and operational integrity. Question 16. Risk assessment procedures indicate that the introduction of a new automated service deployment pipeline for a critical customer-facing application requires a thorough evaluation of potential security vulnerabilities and compliance deviations before it goes live. Which of the following approaches best aligns with professional best practices for managing these risks within a cloud management and automation framework? Option A. Conduct a comprehensive manual risk assessment and audit of the entire deployment process only after the service has been deployed and is operational. Option B. Implement automated security and compliance checks directly within the CI/CD pipeline, with defined thresholds for risk tolerance that trigger alerts or automated remediation actions. Option C. Rely on the inherent security features of the underlying cloud infrastructure without conducting specific assessments for the new automated service. Option D. Prioritize rapid deployment of the new service to meet business demands, deferring detailed risk assessment and mitigation to a later, less critical phase. The correct answer is B. Implement automated security and compliance checks directly within the CI/CD pipeline, with defined thresholds for risk tolerance that trigger alerts or automated remediation actions. Explanation. This scenario presents a common challenge in cloud management and automation, balancing the need for rapid deployment and innovation with robust security and compliance. The professional challenge lies in identifying and mitigating risks associated with new service introductions without stifling agility. Careful judgment is required to ensure that the risk assessment process is thorough, actionable, and integrated into the development lifecycle, rather than being a bureaucratic hurdle. The correct approach represents best professional practice because it embeds risk assessment directly into the automation workflow. By defining clear risk tolerance levels and integrating automated checks and balances within the CI/CD pipeline, organizations can proactively identify and address potential security and compliance issues before they impact production environments. This aligns with the principles of security by design and compliance by design, which are increasingly mandated by regulatory frameworks that emphasize proactive risk management and continuous monitoring. The VMware Certified Professional 7 Cloud Management and Automation certification focuses on building and managing such automated, secure, and compliant cloud environments. An incorrect approach that relies solely on manual post-deployment audits fails to meet the dynamic nature of cloud environments and the speed of modern development. This approach introduces significant regulatory and ethical failures by allowing potentially non-compliant or insecure configurations to go live, increasing the likelihood of data breaches, service disruptions, and regulatory penalties. Demonstrates a reactive rather than proactive stance on risk management, which is often viewed as a deficiency in professional practice and can lead to severe consequences. Another incorrect approach that prioritizes speed over comprehensive risk evaluation by skipping critical security and compliance checks is ethically unsound and professionally negligent. This directly contravenes the implied duty of care to protect organizational assets and customer data. It also creates a significant regulatory risk, as many compliance frameworks require documented evidence of risk assessment and mitigation for all deployed services. The professional reasoning process for such situation should involve a structured approach to risk management. This includes 1. Identifying potential threats and vulnerabilities specific to the cloud service and its automation. 2. Assessing the likelihood and impact of these risks. 3. Determining the organization's risk tolerance. 4. Implementing appropriate controls, which in this context should be automated where possible. 5. Continuously monitoring and reviewing the effectiveness of these controls. Professionals must advocate for the integration of risk assessment into the automation strategy, ensuring that compliance and security are not afterthoughts but integral components of the cloud management and automation framework. Question 17. The risk matrix shows a high likelihood and high impact rating for unauthorized access to customer data during the execution of a new automated provisioning workflow. Which of the following represents the most appropriate risk mitigation strategy? Option A. Implement granular role-based access controls (RBAC) for the automation service account. Enforce multi-factor authentication for all administrative access to the automation platform, and conduct regular security audits of the workflow logs. Option B. Implement a broad security policy that restricts all access to the automation platform, effectively halting the new workflow's functionality. Option C. Document the risk as a known issue and defer remediation until a future maintenance cycle. Option D. Proceed with the deployment of the automation workflow as planned, assuming that existing network security measures will adequately protect the data. The correct answer is A. Implement granular role-based access controls (RBAC) for the automation service account. Enforce multi-factor authentication for all administrative access to the automation platform, and conduct regular security audits of the workflow logs. Explanation. This scenario presents a common challenge in cloud management and automation, balancing the need for rapid deployment and innovation with robust security and compliance requirements. The professional is tasked with assessing risks associated with a new automation workflow that integrates with sensitive customer data. The challenge lies in accurately identifying potential threats, evaluating their likelihood and impact, and then proposing mitigation strategies that are both effective and aligned with regulatory mandates. This requires a deep understanding of the specific VMware technologies involved, the potential attack vectors, and the relevant compliance frameworks applicable to cloud environments. The correct approach involves a systematic and documented risk assessment process that directly maps identified risks to specific mitigation controls. This aligns with best professional practices by ensuring that security and compliance are not afterthoughts, but are integrated into the design and implementation of automation workflows. Specifically, it adheres to the principle of least privilege and defense in depth, common tenets in cybersecurity frameworks. By prioritizing risks based on their potential impact and likelihood, and then selecting controls that directly address these risks, the professional demonstrates due diligence and a commitment to protecting sensitive data and maintaining operational integrity. This proactive approach is crucial for meeting regulatory obligations, which often mandate a risk-based security posture. An incorrect approach that focuses solely on the technical feasibility of the automation without a thorough risk assessment fails to address potential vulnerabilities. This could lead to the deployment of insecure systems, exposing sensitive data to unauthorized access or modification, which would be a direct violation of data protection regulations. Another incorrect approach that relies on generic security measures without tailoring them to the specific risks of the automation workflow is also professionally deficient. Generic measures may not adequately address the unique threat landscape presented by the new automation, leaving critical gaps in security. Furthermore, an approach that bypasses established risk assessment procedures to expedite deployment, even with good intentions, undermines the integrity of the security program and can lead to significant compliance failures and reputational damage. Professionals should employ a structured decision-making process that begins with a comprehensive understanding of the system and its operational context. This involves identifying all stakeholders, understanding the data flows, and mapping out potential threat actors and their motivations. The next step is to conduct a thorough risk assessment, utilizing tools like a risk matrix to categorize and prioritize risks. Based on this assessment, appropriate mitigation strategies should be developed and documented. Finally, these strategies must be implemented, monitored, and regularly reviewed to ensure their continued effectiveness and compliance with evolving regulatory requirements. Question 18. Cost-benefit analysis shows that implementing a new automated provisioning workflow for virtual machines within the vRealize automation suite could significantly reduce deployment times and associated labor costs. However, the proposed implementation plan focuses primarily on achieving these cost reductions and does not explicitly detail security hardening measures, integration with existing SIEM solutions, or a comprehensive impact assessment on the current vRealize orchestrator workflows, which approach best aligns with professional best practices for cloud management and automation in this scenario. Option A. Implement the automation with minimal security configurations, relying on existing network security controls to mitigate potential risks and defer comprehensive logging integration to a later date. Option B. Delay the implementation until a detailed security hardening plan, a robust integration strategy with existing monitoring and logging tools, and a thorough impact assessment of the proposed automation on the existing vRealize environment are developed and approved. Option C. Proceed with the implementation as planned, prioritizing the immediate cost savings and addressing security and integration concerns in a subsequent phase after the initial benefits are realized. Option D. Focus solely on the automation's ability to reduce deployment times, assuming that any security or operational issues that arise can be addressed reactively as they occur. The correct answer is C. Proceed with the implementation as planned, prioritizing the immediate cost savings and addressing security and integration concerns in a subsequent phase after the initial benefits are realized. Explanation. This scenario presents a common challenge in cloud management and automation, balancing the immediate benefits of a new technology with its long-term operational and security implications. The professional challenge lies in evaluating a proposed automation solution not just on its projected cost savings, but also on its alignment with established best practices for security, compliance, and maintainability within the VMware vRealize suite. The prompt specifically requires adherence to the regulatory framework, laws, and guidelines for the 2V0-731 VMware Certified Professional 7 Cloud Management and Automation exam. While this exam focuses on technical proficiency, it implicitly assumes adherence to industry best practices that often have regulatory underpinnings related to data security, operational resilience, and auditability. The correct approach represents best professional practice because it prioritizes a holistic evaluation that includes security hardening, integration with existing monitoring and logging systems, and a thorough review of the automation's impact on the overall vRealize environment. This aligns with the principle of security by design and ensures that the automation solution does not introduce vulnerabilities or operational complexities that could lead to future compliance issues or service disruptions. Adhering to these principles is crucial for maintaining a secure and compliant cloud infrastructure, which is a fundamental expectation in professional IT operations. An incorrect approach that focuses solely on the immediate cost savings without adequate consideration for security hardening would be professionally unacceptable. This failure to integrate security from the outset creates a significant risk of introducing vulnerabilities that could be exploited, leading to data breaches or service outages. Such an oversight could violate implicit regulatory expectations regarding data protection and operational integrity. Another incorrect approach that neglects to integrate the automation with existing logging and monitoring systems would hinder the ability to audit the automation's actions and troubleshoot issues effectively. This lack of visibility and auditability can be a direct contravention of compliance requirements that mandate traceable operational activities. Furthermore, an approach that bypasses a thorough review of the automation's impact on the existing vRealize environment risks introducing unintended consequences, such as performance degradation or configuration drift, which can undermine the stability and reliability of the cloud platform. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a structured evaluation framework. This framework should begin with clearly defining the business objectives and expected benefits of the proposed automation. Subsequently, a comprehensive risk assessment should be conducted, considering security, operational, and compliance implications. This assessment should inform the selection of an approach that not only meets the functional requirements, but also adheres to best practices for secure and maintainable automation. Finally, a post-implementation review should be performed to validate that the automation is operating as intended and meeting its objectives without introducing undue risks. Question 19. Risk assessment procedures indicate that the implementation of new automation workflows for resource provisioning in the VMware cloud environment could introduce potential security vulnerabilities and compliance deviations if not carefully managed. Which approach best mitigates these risks while ensuring efficient cloud operations? Option A. Prioritize rapid deployment of automation scripts to accelerate resource provisioning, addressing any identified issues post-implementation through reactive patching. Option B. Bypass formal change management and approval processes for automation deployments to ensure maximum agility and speed of delivery. Option C. Implement automation workflows only after a comprehensive review of their security implications, compliance adherence, and thorough testing in a staging environment with formal stakeholder approval. Option D. Utilize readily available, third-party automation scripts without extensive validation, assuming they meet general industry standards for security. Correct answer is A. Prioritize rapid deployment of automation scripts to accelerate resource provisioning, addressing any identified issues post-implementation through reactive patching. Explanation. This scenario presents a common challenge in cloud management and automation, balancing the need for rapid deployment and innovation with robust security and compliance requirements. The professional challenge lies in identifying and implementing automation solutions that not only enhance efficiency, but also adhere to the strict regulatory framework governing the use of VMware cloud technologies. The specific jurisdiction for this exam, 2V0-731 VMware, Certified Professional 7 Cloud Management and Automation, implies adherence to VMware's own best practices and general IT governance principles, which are often aligned with industry standards like ITIL and ISO 27001, but without referencing specific external legal statutes unless explicitly stated for the exam. The correct approach represents best professional practice because it prioritizes a comprehensive, risk-based evaluation of automation solutions. This involves understanding the potential impact of automation on security, compliance, and operational stability before implementation. By engaging stakeholders and conducting thorough testing, professionals ensure that automation aligns with established policies and regulatory expectations, thereby minimizing the risk of breaches, non-compliance, and service disruptions. This proactive stance is crucial for maintaining trust and demonstrating due diligence in a regulated environment. An incorrect approach that focuses solely on speed of deployment without adequate security and compliance checks is professionally unacceptable. This failure constitutes a significant regulatory and ethical lapse because it disregards the fundamental principles of secure cloud operations and data protection. Such an approach increases the likelihood of vulnerabilities being introduced, leading to potential data breaches, unauthorized access, and noncompliance with internal policies and industry best practices. This can result in reputational damage, financial penalties, and loss of customer trust. Another incorrect approach that bypasses established change management and approval processes is also professionally unacceptable. This bypass undermines the integrity of the operational environment and introduces uncontrolled risk. It violates the ethical obligation to maintain a secure and stable system and can lead to unforeseen consequences, including system instability, security gaps, and audit failures. This demonstrates a lack of professional responsibility and adherence to established governance frameworks. A third incorrect approach that relies on outdated or unverified automation scripts without proper validation is professionally unsound. This practice introduces significant technical debt and security risks. Automation scripts, like any code, can contain errors or vulnerabilities that may not be apparent without rigorous testing. Deploying such scripts without due diligence can lead to unintended consequences, system failures, and security compromises, all of which are ethically and professionally unacceptable in a managed cloud environment. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a structured approach. 1. Understand the objective. Clearly define the business need for automation. 2. Identify risks. Conduct a thorough risk assessment considering security, compliance, operational, and financial impacts. 3. Evaluate solutions. Research and vet potential automation tools and scripts against identified risks and requirements. 4. Engage stakeholders. Collaborate with security, compliance, and operations teams to ensure alignment. 5. Test rigorously. Implement a comprehensive testing strategy in a non-production environment. 6. Document thoroughly. Maintain detailed records of the automation process, testing, and approvals. 7. Monitor continuously. Establish ongoing monitoring and review mechanisms for automated processes. Question 20. The monitoring system demonstrates a consistent upward trend in CPU utilization across critical virtual machines over the past quarter, with peak usage now frequently exceeding 80% during business hours. This trend is projected to continue based on anticipated application growth. Which of the following represents the most professional and effective approach to address this situation? Option A. Initiate a comprehensive capacity planning exercise to forecast future resource needs, evaluate potential scaling strategies, vertical and horizontal, and explore resource optimization techniques, presenting a phased plan for implementation. Option B. Document the observed trend and schedule a review of the monitoring data in the next quarterly operational meeting. Option C. Immediately provision additional CPU resources to all virtual machines exhibiting high utilization to preemptively avoid performance degradation. Option D. Implement aggressive cost-saving measures across the cloud environment to offset the anticipated increase in resource expenditure. The correct answer is A. Initiate a comprehensive capacity planning exercise to forecast future resource needs, evaluate potential scaling strategies, vertical and horizontal, and explore resource optimization techniques, presenting a phased plan for implementation. Explanation. The monitoring system demonstrates a critical need for proactive capacity planning. The scenario is professionally challenging because it requires balancing immediate operational stability with long-term resource allocation and cost optimization, all while adhering to service-level agreements, SLAs, and potential regulatory compliance requirements related to resource utilization and performance. Failure to address this trend can lead to performance degradation, service disruption, and increased operational costs due to emergency scaling or inefficient resource usage. The correct approach represents best professional practice because it involves a systematic and data-driven evaluation of current resource consumption trends against projected future demand. This proactive stance allows for informed decision-making regarding infrastructure scaling, resource optimization, and budget allocation. It aligns with best practices in cloud management by ensuring that resources are provisioned efficiently, cost-effectively, and in a manner that sustains performance and availability, thereby meeting or exceeding SLA commitments. This approach also supports continuous improvement by providing data for future planning cycles. An incorrect approach that involves only reacting to performance alerts when they occur is professionally unacceptable. This reactive strategy leads to firefighting, increased risk of service outages, and often higher costs associated with emergency scaling. It fails to meet the professional obligation to maintain stable and performant services and can violate SLAs. Another incorrect approach, focusing solely on cost reduction without considering performance implications, is also professionally unsound. This can lead to under-provisioning, performance bottlenecks, and ultimately, customer dissatisfaction and potential SLA breaches. Ignoring the trend altogether is a dereliction of professional duty, as it allows a known issue to fester, leading to inevitable problems. The professional reasoning process for similar situations should involve 1. Recognizing and quantifying the observed trend. 2. Analyzing the root causes of the trend. 3. Forecasting future resource needs based on the trend and business projections. 4. Evaluating various scaling and optimization strategies, considering their impact on performance, cost, and risk. 5. Developing a phased implementation plan with clear metrics for success. 6. Communicating findings and recommendations to stakeholders for informed decision-making.